it is abundantly clear to me that it is time to allow parents and victims to sue this company. They have got to be able to get into court and to get in front of a jury and hold this company accountable. And that begins with Mark Zuckerberg. There has to be accountability. We need to open the courtroom doors and allow victims to have their day in court. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Savage, let me just pick up where Senator Klobuchar just left off. You said that in your experience, a majority of VR users are under the age of 13?
That's correct.
And that this is apparent to Meta leadership, you said?
Yes, it's apparent to anyone who uses the product.
Who in particular in Meta leadership?
I'm curious if you remember any particular posts, but I know it's apparent to at least C-suite.
Correct. There were legal directors, for instance, who would consistently monitor employees who would post underage videos of their own children using VR. So this was directly visible to leadership who were posting these videos and having it removed internally.
Mark Zuckerberg is aware of this, yes or no?
He would have to be. Oh, sorry.
That's a yes, Dr. Zattizahn. Ms. Savage?
The only way that he would not be aware is if he had never used his own headset.
Well, that's extraordinary. And it's particularly extraordinary because let's take a look at actually Mark Zuckerberg's testimony. Mark Zuckerberg has testified before this committee as recently as just last year, January 31st, 2024. Let's put it up so we can see it. He says, this is Zuckerberg testifying, we don't allow people under the age of 13 on our service. So if anyone who's under the age of 13, if we find them, we remove them from our service. And then in response to another question, he says, we don't want users under the age of 13. We don't want users under the age of 13. Ms. Savage, is this true?
It's an interesting quote. I mean, it would require the user to be honest about their age, in which case Meta would kick them off. But from research, even before Meta acquired the Oculus technology, we know that children are usually not using an account that accurately reflects their age for several reasons. The want part is interesting to me. I don't think their behavior matches that sentiment.
Dr. Sattizahn, is it true that Meta does not want users under the age of 13 on the platform in any of their services?
I'd like to go back to the point that you made in response to this, is that if they did, their value, their engagement, their profits would go through the floor. In this quote, if is doing a lot of work because they have taken no substantive efforts to make sure that they're understanding that there are kids under 13. It's a lie by avoidance, and Meta knows it.
It's a lie by avoidance. So in other words, Mark Zuckerberg, when he tested, this is last year, I want to emphasize. This wasn't 10 years ago. This is barely 10 months ago. This was just last year when Mark Zuckerberg says, we don't want people who are under age 13. They're not on our platform. And your testimony here today is, in fact, they're rampant on the platform, and Meta is specifically targeting them. Isn't that your testimony?
Yes, that's correct.
So Mark Zuckerberg has, once again, deliberately misled and lied to the American people. I mean, this is really, really extraordinary. Let me just make sure that I understand the full import of what you're testifying to. Dr. Sattizahn, if I could just come back to you. You have testified that Meta erases evidence of abuse on its VR platform. Is that correct?
Correct.
That Meta changes research to not gather data on emotional harm once it became aware that it was rampant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That Meta manipulates results of data to obscure any harm or other damage, shall we say, to users. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Why do the research at all?
That's a great question. You have to do research. Actually, going back to my earlier point, the siloing of research helps explain this. When you put the most sensitive research into sort of bucket where no one else sees it, all of the other research that's done is phenomenal. And other researchers of the company are great at their job. They help make the product look better, play better, and experience better, but they're not thinking about safety or integrity because they're told not to.
Well, why not? My question is, why do any research at all on harms? You've testified that you were doing research on harms. Other people did research on harms, but Meta and its various entities, legal, et cetera, the C-suite would intervene and say, not that, change this, scrub that. Why do any of it to begin with then?
It comes down to the fact that some research is necessary to create a paper trail in order to show that you are doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
For instance, privacy work, you have to show that you are abiding by some sort of general data privacy, whether you're in one country or another, and you have to have that on record. But there are some things that are too sensitive to be done, et cetera, et cetera.
Isn't it precisely so that you can come before bodies like this one and go before the public and go before your shareholders and say, we're doing research on harm. We're doing gobs of research on harm. What they don't tell you is they're altering the research on harm. The whole point of doing it is so you can lie about it and create the impression that, in fact, as Zuckerberg testified to this committee, we're tracking it closely, when in fact they're lying about it through their teeth. I mean, isn't that in fact what's going on?
If I may?
Please.
Yesterday, Andy Stone, spokesperson for Meta, actually used this exact same excuse, a tweet about 12 hours ago, where his response to the Washington Post article, which as we predicted a year ago, was, we have done over 180 studies, including topics such as youth, harm, etc. That response, again, is a lie by avoidance because it's pointing out some rote number that means nothing. The whole point of this testimony is that the research they're doing is being pruned and manipulated, yet now they're going before yourself, a government body, the public, and saying, but look, we did some research.
Why are children, why is having children under the age of 13, why is it so important to Meta? You've both testified to this, your declarations testify to it. Why is it so important to Meta? Go ahead, Ms. Savage.
Children drive product adoption in the household, and VR is a gaming device.
So they drive product adoption, which means what for Meta? Just cash it out for us.
That means the reason that families buy VR headsets is for kids.
Which means more money for Meta.
Yes.
So this is about profits at the end of the day.
Yes.
Let's just be really clear. Meta's number one bottom line is money. It is profits, bar nothing. That's it. And what you're testifying to is they will do anything, including exposing our children to the most vile, if it means more profits for Meta. Have I got that right?
Yes. If I may.
Please.
When I was doing research to identify the harms that children were facing in VR, which I had to be sneaky about because legal wouldn't actually let me do it, I identified that Roblox, the app in VR, was being used by coordinated pedophile rings. They set up strip clubs and they pay children to strip, and that Robux can be converted into real money. So, and I flagged this to Meta. I said, under no circumstances should we host the app Roblox on their headset. You can now download it in their app store.
I'm going to turn this back over to the chairwoman because my time has expired. I just want to end by saying this. It is abundantly clear to me that it is time to allow parents and victims to sue this company. They have got to be able to get into court and to get in front of a jury and hold this company accountable. And that begins with Mark Zuckerberg. There has to be accountability. We need to open the courtroom doors and allow victims to have their day in court. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Savage, you testified earlier that in your view, a majority of Meta's VR users are under the age of 13. I'm just curious, what percentage, if you had to guess, or maybe you know the exact number, maybe you do, Doctor, what proportion of Meta's VR users, the children, the minors, are exposed to explicit content, sexual propositioning, sexual abuse of some kind on a VR platform?
The prevalence of it is extremely high because it's very difficult to monitor that content in VR. It's difficult to monitor it on Instagram, much less VR. So I would estimate that any child that is in a social space in VR will come in contact with or directly expose something very inappropriate.
I'm sorry, did you say any child?
Yes.
So you mean every user?
Yes.
Every user will be exposed, every minor, every child will be exposed to explicit content of some sort, is what you're saying.
I see it every time I use the headset.
That's remarkable. That's just remarkable. You also said, Ms. Savage, that negligence in the VR platform is emblematic of negligence across Meta's platforms when it comes to child safety. Let me just ask you about chatbots. This has come up before. I'm sure that you're aware of the recent reporting that Meta allowed its AI chatbots to engage in explicit content, romantic and sensual, I think, conversations with children. Let's just take a look, actually, at what the internal document brought forward by a whistleblower said. It's right here in this middle portion. This is a Meta document. It is acceptable to engage a child in conversations that are romantic or sensual. Let me say that again. It is acceptable to engage a child in conversations that are romantic or sensual. It is acceptable to describe a child in terms that evidence their attractiveness. Again, this is Meta's own internal, these are their own internal guidelines. Does this surprise you at all?
Unfortunately, no.
Doctor, does this surprise you?
Not at all.
When Meta says, as they have said, following the disclosure of these guidelines, that they will redouble their efforts to make sure that children are safe on their platforms, including with chatbots, does that give you any comfort? Do you think that we should take them at their word?
Oh, no.
In no way, shape, or form, no.
In no way, shape, or form. Let me just ask you one other thing. You were with Meta how long, Ms. Savage, approximately?
4 years.
4 years. Dr. Sattizahn, what about you?
6 years, and I do want to say for context, that's about longer than 90% of employees will ever work at the company because the turnover is so quickly. I believe it would have been about 80 for you.
They calculate it for us on our profiles, so we know that that's correct.
Wow, 4 years and 6 years respectively. As you look back on it, if you knew then what you know now, would you have gone to work for Meta, Ms. Savage?
I think I knew that about the company going into it. I hope to make it better.
Doctor?
I would have, and I would have taken even better documentation.
Let me just end with this. Do you think based on what you know now and your time at the company, do you think that Meta is a force for good in this country and in the world?
I don't see how they can be.
Dr. Sattizahn?
No, it is aggressively ambivalent to people.
Aggressively ambivalent to people, and yet this is a company all about people, their attention, their interests, their data, their lives. This is a company that's lost its way, profoundly lost its way, and they are harming our children as a result. Thank you, Madam Chair.